All right, good evening, everybody. The mic doesn't amplify for everybody here, but it will. We're recording it for purposes of other neighbors who can't make it tonight. This is the first of two sessions. For those of you who have not met me, I'm Steve Arnosky. I'm your city councilman for Ward 3. What we want to do tonight, we've got some of the same people, if you've been paying attention to prior meetings on this at the city council level. We've got a couple of our consultants here who have spoken. We're going to start this evening off. I'm going to turn it over to Jared Driscoll, and we're going to go through a short presentation because it's not going to be us talking. It's really here to make sure to hear your questions, and we're going to try and focus the questions and answers on things that are personal to you. So, not the bigger issues, but if you have questions about how this is going to be impacting what's going on your street and in your home. So this is really here mostly for a question and answer perspective. I also have a mic that I'll pass around as well, but again, that is just for recording purposes so that the video comes through for people who are not here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jared Driscoll.
Thank you, Councilman Arnosky. So real quick, I want to go through kind of the format for these meetings. The idea really for this meeting is to do a quick high-level overview on what the FDDP footing drain disconnection program is going to look like as far as it sits right now, right? We brought with us the consultants. We've been leaning heavily on the consultants from Moorland. We have Brian Hannon with us today. He'll be here for the duration. Jared Stuyvesant with Moorland as well. Mike Lunn from Primordial is also here. Mike was actually the utilities director for the city of Grand Rapids when they went through their successful FDDP. So Brad Kay, our city manager, is also with us. He'll be diligently taking notes, I'm sure. And then Bruce Royce, who is out there kind of herding traffic. He's been with the city for a number of years, and he's a good resource as well for the majority of this presentation. This meeting is going to be interacting with you guys. We know you have concerns, you have questions. Some of you may be more informed than others. Some of you, this is the first you're hearing of it. You got a letter in the mail and you're just showing up like, hey, what's footing drain disconnection? Why is my address on here and what's it mean to me? So that's kind of the idea for this presentation. We're going to get through this pretty quickly, and after we're done, I'm going to bring the consultants up here, and we're going to just go through the room and answer your questions to the best of our ability. We have the room till 6:30, and then we got to kind of kick everybody out, and we have another meeting coming at 7. It's going to be the exact same meeting at 7. So we want to make sure everybody has their questions answered. You might not like the answers, but we'll do the best of our ability to get those answers to you. So we'll go around the room afterwards and try to keep it short and sweet. We're trying not to get into a debate. This is more of just informative, and then hear your questions and go that route, okay? So before I get into this presentation, I want to do some a backstory basically on why we're doing this, right? I'm going to show you some charts and some graphics that confirm that idea and that thought process, but this goes back to the early 1970s, the Clean Water Act. That was instituted across the country, and the idea was to take what were normally combined sewer systems and separate them into sanitary sewer, just your raw wastewater, your actual sewage, as well as your stormwater, right? Somebody along the way decided, and as an operator for wastewater facilities, I think it's a great idea to separate those two. I mean, treating every gallon of water that's clean, that's stormwater, it's a bad economic practice for any municipality. So separating those was a priority. The city of Midland didn't pass an ordinance until 1987, I think it was October of 87, to actually institute that idea from footing drains. So every home built after 1987 was required to have their connection from their footing drain connected to the storm and not the sanitary. So anything, if a house was built after 87 in the city of Midland and they're connected to the sanitary, that's an illegal connection. So obviously all the folks in this room, I'm assuming their home was built at or before 1987, and that's why we're here, and that's why we focused on your neighborhood. So we'll get into it. This is an important slide. So rather than go through the entire thing and all the details, I want you to look at these two charts right here. So when we metered the Moorland pump station specific to your neighborhood, unfortunately we can't. We tried. These are all or nothing. I apologize. I will say this presentation and the video from MCTV will be posted on the city's webpage probably tonight, if not tomorrow morning at the latest, so you can access those slides. So I apologize for that, sir. But I'll read you the pie charts. That's the most important portion. So right here we have basically a pie chart of our dry weather flow. And dry weather is what we experience in our wastewater system 99 point whatever % of the time. In the rare event we get rain and heavy rains, that's our wet weather flow. And this was metered at the pump station during a 25-year, 24-hour event. So the orange portion of that pie is 49 gallons a minute. That's what we're assuming is the infiltration and inflow, which is I&I. You're going to hear me say that a few times. The other 122 gallons a minute, that's just our actual sanitary wastewater flow from that neighborhood above that pump station, as far as your sink, showers, bathtubs, etc. Typical sanitary waste that we want to send to the plant. Wet weather conditions, as you can see, that 122 doesn't change because the population hasn't changed. This is our inflow and infiltration, our I&I, 982 gallons a minute. So we're going from 49 gallons a minute, no rain, 982 gallons a minute during rain, in excess of what we already want to treat from your wastewater. So that's an astronomical difference in I&I that's happening in that neighborhood, right? So for perspective, we need to focus on this number right here too. 275 gallons per capita per day, gallons per person per day. We've heard many times residents talk about upsizing pump stations, upsizing pipes, and making everything bigger and better. And on the surface, I see how that might be a good idea. The reality is when we go to do a collection system project, the state's going to have to approve that project. And what they've been doing as of late is looking at what our actual I&I is. They don't want to see any I&I over 275 gallons per capita per day, right? That's total flow. They don't want to. That's the max they want to see. So if we're going to apply for a Part 41 permit, do a project in a sewer system, they're going to look to see, okay, how are you guys doing on your I&I? Well, go back up here and look at the Whitewood. I'm sorry, the Moorland pump station I&I or GPCD, 822 gallons per capita per day. So we are extremely in excess of the 275, which is kind of a high number if you think about it. If we're getting 122 from Sanitary, and they're allowing us another 150 of inflow, then we are extremely in excess of what they want to see for our system. And the downside of, again, there's really no upside in creating a larger pump station, larger pipes, right? But there are some downsides, and as an operator, I've seen it. So if you create a huge system, pump collection system, and I've seen municipalities that they plan for all this expansion and growth. I came from the rural area, right? We have 36-inch mains in some of these small towns, and we don't get grit, the stuff that settles out at the bottom of these pipes, unless we get a heavy rain event. And then also we have hydrogen sulfide issues. So when you have a huge system that's not treating the 99%, it's treating just the rain events that you almost never see, you're going to have hydrogen sulfide issues, which is corrosive, it's explosive, it smells bad, it rots your wet wells, it's bad for your pumps. And if we create a system too big for what we're actually trying to treat 99% of the time, we're going to have some significantly negative issues. And if you get bored, go home, look at YouTube tonight. You can find plenty of videos of manholes being exploded out of a sewer system. That's hydrogen sulfide. It got ignited, it exploded. So there are concerns with building a system that's too big for what it actually is required for. This piggybacks back to that pump station. Okay, so look at this line right here. 800 gallons a minute. That's what that pump station is designed for. During the 25-year, 24-hour events, we're seeing flows of that pump station of 1,130 gallons a minute, way in excess of what it's supposed to be pumping as far as sanitary wastewater. It's estimated from the engineering formulas that if we do a footing drain disconnect program and it's successful, we can knock that down to 630 during those events. So just, again, a graphic to show you what the actual, this is the why. This is the why this route was chosen. And so this slide is important. A lot of folks, I know, especially in this district, there was some misinformation as far as who's paying for it, what the costs are. I've heard that, $20,000, we have to pay for 20 grand. Not accurate. The city voted, I think on August 9th, when they approved the framework for this program, to cover the cost up to $20,000, which is an invariable number, let's just put it that way. And then the $7,500 is the homeowner infrastructure. So everything that's homeowner, private, they're going to cover $7,500 of the cost, which should cover all the costs of this program. The remaining $13,000 is going to be the public infrastructure portion. So we've heard that you're going to have to pay for it. That's just not true. The city's voted to pay for it. This is just simply, I put this up here because on the back of your FAQ, question number 14, I believe, shows the scope of the items. And again, this is where we're at right now. This list could change. But this is the scope of what's going to be covered under that $7,500. So I recommend you take that home. The FAQ is also online. And at the end of this presentation, you're going to see the link to the flood response page if you guys haven't already accessed it. And also, if you have any questions that maybe you forgot to ask or weren't comfortable asking, you can email the footing drain disconnect email, which myself, Bruce, we look at on a daily basis, and we try to respond as quickly as possible. So just keep in mind, question 14, that's basically the exact same thing as that slide. So I wanted to point that out. Successful FDDPs. As I mentioned, Mike Lund was part of Grand Rapids' FDDP program to a successful rate. Both Brian and Jared have had success working for different communities, doing the exact same thing. And this one I like, the city of Durand. The numbers are crazy, right? So you've got 107 footing drains disconnected, which equated to 1,200 gallons per day per house during, I'm assuming, wet weather events. Just 107. That's a crazy amount of water we're taking out of our sanitary system. Here's a map, and I know you guys are not going to like this map as it stands right now, but these maps are on the flood response page. If you go to the flood response page, which again you'll see at the end, scroll down a ways. It's got your map. You can enlarge it, you can download it, do whatever you want with it. But this just shows the homes that are part of this program as it stands right now. And again, this is assuming that all homes built during 1987 or before are connected to our sanitary system. It's possible some of you aren't. This is going to be a process. We're going to have inspections done by qualified contractors to determine that. But this is just our assumptions based on the year your home was built. So as far as the colors, so the green are, there's curb piping needed to get to the storm sewer. The red homes, there's actually storm sewer out front that we can send laterals to. And then the blue homes are along the drain, and we can hopefully daylight some of the storm water to those locations. So this might be on no, it's not on one of our tripods, but this is online. Access that whenever you want. And of course, the presentation will be online as well. So we're going to go through some quick images of what, just kind of give you an understanding of what it looks like. So we're assuming that most homes that have footing drains built before ¡88 don't have a sump pump, right? So this is kind of showing you an image. Storm sewers are located above the sanitary sewer. So to get those, to get the water from your footing drain to the sanitary sewer, it's most likely going to require a crock and a sump pump to get there. Disregard this little portion where it's discharging the footing drain water out to your outlawn. That's not really the case, and I'll show you that in the next slide. This is what it'll look like. This is how it'll be discharged into this piece of pipe, which will be eventually tie into our storm sewer. This air gap allows kind of a plan B. If there's blockages, or if your kids shove some golf balls or some debris down there, you want to make sure that thing's clean. And if the storm sewer is surcharged or it's maxed out or there's a blockage, instead of going back into your home, it'll spill out on the lawn and then probably just go back in your footing drain and recycle into the pump until the issue is resolved. So sump pumps, real quick. We're going to have plenty of time for questions, guys. So this is what a sump pump looks like. I know for me personally, everywhere I've lived, I've had a sump pump. So I understand people who have never had them before. It seems like something that's new and unique. But every home built after 1987 in Midland's got a sump pump. It's not a scary thing. I've never had any issues with mine. That's obviously just my own personal situation. But here's what it's going to look like. And this is all covered by the city. This is a check valve. So a check valve functions where flow can go through that lateral and up and out. And then when the flow is either not flowing or it comes back down from that vertical pipe, this will close, and then the water won't go back into your system and then not back up your basement. So this is just kind of just another diagram of what a pump station looks like. It's going to be tied, or a sump pump will look like. And if you have questions about those, which I'm sure you will, we'll have answers hopefully. All right, backflow preventers. So this is a sanitary backflow preventer. Similar to the check valve for the sump pump, it's the same idea. As part of this program, council's offered this as an item to you if you so choose to elect. The city's going to pay for it. They're going to pay for the cost of the materials and the installation. But if you choose to go to have a sanitary backflow preventer installed in your lateral to prevent sanitary wastewater after we're done with the disconnection from coming back towards your home, you can elect that. The only caveat to that, I would say, is that it's your responsibility once it's installed. We're not staffed to go to every home and make sure that these things are clean and operating right. It's pretty simple. There's a cap. Let's see, did I go? Oh, sorry about that. A clean out cap, so flow's going out. This is down. Flow comes back. This closes. It's possible to get debris in there to where it prevents that from going backwards and back into the crock, or back into your home rather. So that's something that we think is a good thing. We're offering it to you. But again, it's up to you to choose to elect that. If not, that's fine too. But it's covered by the city under this program. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Thanks, Jared. Which one of these is the laser? Good. All right, good evening, everybody. What I'm going to talk about here is kind of where we're at with this program. And I know some of this is kind of hard to see, but again, this will be up on the website. But generally, we're here where we're doing public presentations and public meetings. The council still needs to vote to formally adopt some of these ordinances and things that go along with the program. But what I'm here to do tonight is to just generally educate you on what this program would look like as a homeowner, how it's going to be executed, what happens inside your house, and how it works. So what we need to do as next steps in this program is ultimately go through and pre-qualify some plumbers. So we'll probably get 5 to 6 plumbers that are pre-qualified and familiar with how a program like this would work. And then once those plumbers are pre-qualified, they'll have a listing. They'll actually probably come and talk to you and say, hey, now it's time to start the program. We're one of the available contractors. You can let me do this, or you as the homeowner can select any one of those plumbers. The city will make those names readily available for you. We'll probably have an additional meeting with those plumbers available so you can contact them directly and start going from there. So once the plumber is contacted, what they'll do is they'll come inside your house, and all you need to do is let them down into your basement. They'll look at where the sanitary sewer comes out and goes out of your house. Usually there's a clean out right there. And what they'll do is they'll open that clean out and they'll put a camera down there, and they'll go probably 5 to 6 feet into that line. And at that point, they should be able to find out whether you are connected to the footing drains right outside of that, where that lateral is. So if you don't have a connection, if they don't find anything, you're done. That's all. So the plumber will notify the city, your house has been inspected, it's been complete, we'll mark it off the list, and you have nothing further to do. If they do find that you have a connection, what will happen at that point is they'll put together an estimate of what it looks like to do the disconnection and put a sump pump into your basement. And we'll talk about what that looks like here in just a second. But generally, they'll put together the estimate. They'll approach the city with that. If that estimate is less than the $7,500 threshold, the city can authorize it to begin, and all you'd have to do at that point is let the plumber back into your house, whether it's that plumber or one of the other contractors that are approved to do the program, and then they'll go ahead and execute the work, and then the city will pay the plumber for that. Then at the end, you just need to let the plumbing inspector in to verify that everything's been complete per the plumbing codes, and you'll fill out a satisfaction survey, and you're done. So if it happens to be more than the $7,500 threshold, let's say you have something unique in your house, generally what the city would require is that you go and get a second plumber to come in and give another quote and see if they can meet that $7,500 threshold. If they can't, then the city will have a program manager that could be authorized to approve expenses beyond that, depending on what they entail. Again, reasonable within some of the scope of work that we've included within your questionnaire there as well as online. So again, that'll be up to the program manager, and so there'll be instances that the intent of the city is not to put an undue burden on the homeowners. They're trying to make it easy for you. So get the plumber in your house, let them do the inspection, and go from there. One of the questions that we've heard, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later tonight, is people are worried about having their houses torn up or their yards torn up or whatever. The plumbers will attempt to route the sanitary pipe out the best route that they can to avoid any basement obstructions, to avoid tearing up anything in your basement, to come out the side of your house or the front of your house or the back of your house or whatever makes the most sense to minimize the amount of pipe that it takes to get out of the road and to also avoid any major trees, landscaping, things like that. It's not going to be possible in all cases, but that's their intent. And again, their intent is to try to keep it below that $7,500 threshold. So again, a little bit of work to do yet, but that's generally how the program would work in terms of what the homeowner's responsibility would be. The other thing that we wanted to talk about is if you choose not to participate. So if you're found to have a connection and you choose not to participate, there's going to be a cost for that. And that cost is what it takes for the city to treat that clean water that shouldn't be in the sewer at all. So that cost involves just the cost to basically treat and convey that water, get it from your home down into the sanitary system and all the way to the treatment plant. And it also involves projects that are potentially going to happen if we don't get the water out of the system. The other option would be to upgrade infrastructure, which includes pump stations, additional piping, possibly storage basins. All of that stuff would need to be completed in order to facilitate all this water that's in the system, and then again try to avoid the backups in your basement. So those are those costs that are up there. This it comes out to $94.34, and that's kind of the split up between those two areas. And again, this is there's actually a lot more than this, because if we have to go and pump into a larger pump station and get to the treatment plant, eventually we're going to have to upgrade the treatment plant to take on that additional water that shouldn't be there at all as well. So that's generally the methodology of the program and how it works. And I'll turn it back over to Jared, and I believe we're at the point where we can answer questions. So probably ought to mention your.
Yeah, real quick, again, let me reiterate this, the email address for the footing drain for any questions. Again, I get these every day. I do my best. The flood response page, write that down if you guys don't already have it, or just go to the city of Midland, go under departments, look for the wastewater department, and then you'll see the flood response page as one of those options. And then, like I said, this slide show all of the workshops council's had, council meetings. I mean, everything you could probably ever asked for has been posted up there, so and it's up to date. So, and the FAQ document that we have, I mean, we've had some questions from other meetings and concerns that were valid, and we're going to take those to council, and that's kind of, again, the point of these meetings, is to inform you and then to kind of engage in some dialogue. So without further ado, we'll open it up to some questions. I asked our experts and Bruce, and Steve's going to walk around with the mic. So again, for the purpose of the recording, there's no audio. I'm just yelling, talking into the microphone, so that way the people at home that can't attend these meetings can hear your questions and our answers.
Do I have to say my name and all that stuff, or no? All right, thanks. I came here with one question. I have several more now. Sorry for this. First off, on your first slide, Jared, you had the wrong units, and I hate to point this out, but you're comparing 122 gallons per minute versus 875 gallons per day per capita. I think we need to make sure that's correct.
No, that's, do you have the clicker? So gallons per minute and gallons per capita per day are two totally different things.
Exactly. You compared them together. So.
Oh, we can go back and I can clarify. Maybe I did misspeak, and let me just double check. So, in fact, I'll hand it over to Brian, because he's the source of this information.
I put this crazy slide together, so I think the only thing he misspoke about was comparing the 822. Oh, sorry, the 982 to the 275. It's really comparing the 822 to the 275, because in this particular scenario, with the approximate amount of residents in this area, the gallons per minute for total wet weather flow is 1,100, and the gallons per capita per day is 822. So that's where that misinterpretation was.
So they're still different units, right?
Yes, but we're comparing the 822 to the 275, those are the same units. So right now during your wet weather, it's 822 gallons per person per day,
Yeah.
and Eagle requires 275.
All right, thanks. Second question was regarding the $7,500. I did have a plumber come to my house and give me a quote, and it was significantly higher. I noticed during your costs, you do not have any cost in there for basement repair after busting up the concrete, and you don't have any cost. Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Internal restoration. Okay, I did see that. And then, the 7,500. I think the total cost per house was 20,000, and that included the turf reestablishment and all the other extra stuff. And you're grouping that all into one $7,500 cost.
Yeah, so the question was about the $7,500 cost and whether it was enough to cover some of these things. And then the second question was between the $20,000 number that's been circulated and the $7,500 number per household. So let's start with the first one. Again, your house may be more than $7,500. Again, with our program, we're trying to cover as much stuff as we can. There may be some tweaks to the scope as we get into it and work through some of those finer details with council. So we're going to have to look at that. And again, the intent being that, yeah, if they cut your basement forward, they're going to repair it. And so that would be included in there. The second question about the 7,500 versus the 20,000 is overall there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put in the public right away in order to convey some of the storm this water that's going to come out of your house through the sump pump to the storm system. So within this, you can see there's a lot of these red houses. There's storm sewer out front, and so we need to be able to get that pipe from your house into the storm system. With some of the greenhouses, there's no storm sewer out front, and so we need to put in piping between the back of around the back of the curb to get to the nearest catch basin, so that we can convey that piping away. So that is where the additional, money comes in between the 7,500 and the 20,000, is to accommodate all that piping necessary to convey all that water away, so we're not flooding streets or anything like that. Now, and so the 7,500 was again to the interior of the house to get it out to the road.
Okay, so it's not the small tree and shrub removal, the turf reestablishment, all the other stuff that's listed under number 14.
No,
Okay.
no. The 7,500 should cover most of that.
All right, thank you.
So,
Okay. Next question?
I'm Bill Brent, and I live at 5101 Oak Ridge Drive. This plan, obviously a lot of thought went into a lot of detail, and it might be very good, but it would not have saved my basement from flooding in 2020, and I don't think it would have saved it from 2017 either. And the reason why is I didn't have any water backing up into my basement until the Moorland pump station was shut down. So my question is money included in this proposal, or the larger 50 million as part of a grand proposal, to further protect that pump station from overland flooding so it would never be shut down again and I would never have water in my basement again? Because if the answer is no, it looks like I can count on having water in my basement again, because someday we'll have high overland flooding, that will be shut down again, and my basement will flood. So anyway, that's my question.
yeah, no, that's a very good question. So part of the issue stems from, let's see if I can get back to it, just the ability of that pump station to actually get the water out, right? And
That's why my question was, is there additional money to protect that flood station? I know it's doable,
yeah.
but why have we ignored that when I know my basement's going to flood again?
Yep. And Bruce, I don't know if you want to answer that question in terms of the methodology and some of the things that went into that.
As we had stated in some other public meetings, the Concept 5, was to get us to the accepted level of service that was adopted by council, and that is the 25-year, 24-hour event. The flooding of the overland in the 2020 event was due to the high levels of water that were well in excess of the 100-year flood levels, which the station is protected to and above that level. Exactly where it is, I'm not entirely sure, but it's above a 100-year level. And we reached the 500-year levels. We have addressed it that we are putting this into the normal capital plan because we're not tying it to a level of service, but we are looking at improving the level of protection from the floodwaters, whether that is actually raising that station or if we're building some sort of embankment with doors, floodgates that we can open and close. We are looking at that, but that is in the operating budget, not part of the Concept 5, because that is geared towards a specific level of service.
Yeah, the state wouldn't be able to fund that kind of project since we're only required to design lift stations to be protected from the 100-year flood event. So that's why they're looking at it through their own maintenance and operations budget, as well as a couple of the lift stations, I believe, that are at lower lying areas. There's maybe 8 or 9 that are close to the 100-year, but they're still all above it.
If I can follow, how close are we in developing that? Sorry. How close are we in developing that plan, if you will, to potentially raise that pump station or put up burbs or walls? I mean, is this just going to be talked about? We kick the can down the road? Is there a timeline where decisions will be made? I won't feel safe until that's done.
At this point, we're currently in the evaluation of options. So we are looking at 2 or 3 different good options at this point, and we have to make a decision, and then we'll put together the scope. So it's within a year or 2 to actually have that decision funded, because honestly, we don't have a full cost of that yet. That depends on the options that we go with.
So if you opt for the backflow preventer and that station shuts down, then that sewage will not come back in your house when that closes.
I'm going to the neighbors, right? You gotta go somewhere.
It'll,
My own sewage will. I have
Right.
to stop using my house.
you would have to stop using your house or it would come out. That's true.
This is kind of a follow-up to that. Because we had the massive failure of the water main at the drain, are we also going to figure out how to fix that drain where the culvert has come out as part of this? Because if we don't, and we empty all this water into the storm drain, the road's going to fail.
Yep, we're looking at that as a separate project, not as part of this particular plan, but they do have that on the radar. They've been working through the permitting of that with Eagle.
A couple questions. The first one is, I see in the FAQ, it says the disconnection program is designed to fix this and that, and then, quote, it will prevent houses that experience problems as a result of heavy rain, including the 25-year 24-hour events, from basement backups by eliminating sanitary sewer discharges. This sounds like a definitive statement that if we go through the cost and the effort to make this happen as a homeowner, it's saying here that it will prevent backup into our house. That's my first question. This sounds like a statement.
Yeah, so again, no engineer or city staff person is ever going to be able to say everything's 100% effective all the time, right? Because there's other issues revolving around this, right?
I fully understand that.
listen-
You know, there's a 90% solution, and there's I hope this works.
No, we're
Where
not at
are
the-
we?
we're not
Where
at the
are
hope-
we?
I hope this works stage. We're way past that. So we've got, you know, again, the intent being that we want to prevent sanitary sewage from getting into your basement. So if we can keep those pipes clear and everything going down where it's supposed to go, your lateral comes in on the top of that pipe. So as long as we can keep the pipes less than 100% full, we're going to prevent sanitary sewage from coming backwards where it's not supposed to be. Now again, no solution's 100% because somebody could have wipes in the pipe or a fatberg or something build up in the pipe unrelated to a storm event. And that could happen anytime. That could be now that's happening.
No, I'm
So-
not talking about the odd event out in the tail of some curve. I'm saying you must have done some estimate. Are we at a 90% confidence
Yeah,
level?
so-
95? Where are we?
Mike, I'll let you maybe talk about some of the modeling that got done.
We've actually had flow meters out in the system in the neighborhood, and we've developed hydraulic models of the storm system. Like this is, for example, where this graph would come from here. And we've taken that water out of the system and actually showed in the models that this actually resolves the issue.
And we can see it in the dry weather flow as well, right? So again, if we can get that wet weather to go around the system. Sorry, we've seen it in the dry weather flow. When you look at like the numbers here, you know, how much we'd be removing from the system with this program and how much that would reduce what's in those sanitary pipes during both normal dry weather as well as the wet weather. And again, that gives us that level of confidence that this is going to work.
The second question I have is, what happens when there is a storm event for 24 hours? Typically, you lose power. Now, the corollary here is now you don't just need a sump pump, you need an absolutely uninterruptible power supply for at least 24 hours, possibly several days.
Yes. So
Where is this? Because if you don't have that power, our basements will fill up like a bathtub, guaranteed. Or am I missing something?
nope. What we would recommend is that your sump pump has either a backup battery source of power, or they also have some water backup type pumps that you can use, where you could use the water power in your house to eject it out and run the pumps.
So the guaranteed operability of Sump Pump is not included in any of the cost numbers you've included.
So that is correct. As of today, the city is not going to pay for those backups. That would be on the homeowner to provide those backups. Now, again, that's something that it's part of the reason we're listening to feedback and stuff, so we can take that back to the city council. They can hear your concerns, and maybe that's something that goes into the program. But as of
that
today,
is an obvious
the way it sits
reality
now,
during
it's not.
storms in Midland,
So,
right? Okay.
Yep.
Now, is anyone, another question, is anyone considering the bigger, I understand the infrastructure program is national and may or may not go through, but is anyone here at least in contact with our representatives and senators to possibly piggyback a holistic solution for Midland? We had the vice president in Detroit saying, we want to solve the flooding problem in Detroit. Is there anyone contacting our representative saying, we want to solve the flooding problem in Midland? In a holistic, the wastewater treatment plant, the whole shebang.
yeah. Brad, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that one or not, but.
So that's a complicated answer is the short version. The long version of that is we have been in contact with all of our local representatives up to Congressman Moorland. There have been some appropriations that he is trying to work for us that would help us with some of the costs. Certainly we have the infrastructure plans that are in place right now through the ARPA, I forget the acronym of it all, but essentially trillions of dollars that are available for infrastructure improvements and response. All of that, however, is subjective as to whether or not it'll happen. There are really three activities that are taking place. This is part of one, which is really at a city level, and that's looking at the infrastructure that we have in the ground in terms of making sure that it can do what it's designed to do and intended to do and has been built to do. Secondarily, upstream from us, there is the Four Lakes Task Force and the County of Midland are working on the dams and what should or should not be done there. And then thirdly, there is what's called an infrastructure task force, which is working really through the Midland Business Alliance, but it's bringing together city, county officials, local businesses, and residents and taxpayers as well to look not only at what to do when we flood, but to do what we can do to either prevent or at least lessen the impacts of flooding in the community. So those are all ongoing. That last one is actually working with the county emergency manager and through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers looking at designing of the river channel and basically from the dams downstream to Midland as to what might be helpful to us and what might make things work better, quite frankly.
And one more, you put a slide up there that said those that don't participate will be experiencing extra levies of $100 a month and additional costs, et cetera. Does that exclude those that participate? So we have our places modified and pumps put in and sumps and what have you. Are we excluded from those costs or not?
Yes, the surcharge is only for residents that don't want to participate. We gotta use the mic, sorry.
Yeah, where does the storm water go now? And if that all backs up, do you expect that to come back up, these air gaps?
Yeah, so the stormwater, so currently if you don't have a sump pump and you do have a footing drain, all of the water that infiltrates down in is going into the sanitary system, which is causing some of the issues. The rest of the stormwater just goes through the normal stormwater, surface water drainage system, so through the storm pipes in the street and then out through some of the drainage culverts and things like that. Yep, and then Jared's going to pull up a slide here. That was one of the questions, and that was one of the things is what if we're adding additional stormwater from our basements out into the rest of the storm sewer system? Can it handle it, or are we going to have additional flooding and things like that? So with that, yeah, sure.
In your neighborhood, the stormwater all pretty much exclusively goes to the Inman drain, right? Right, between Oak Ridge and Moorland. That runs down, crosses Perrin, crosses, and then eventually just up the road here from Dow High, crosses underneath Saginaw Road. Once it gets below Saginaw Road, it joins Sturgeon Creek, flows down into the Tittabawassee. So that's the flow of the stormwater.
Well, we did model some of that total capacity, and if we looked during the footing drain flows during that 10-year storm, how much they put out, it's 270 gallons a minute that would be going into the storm sewer system. Additionally, that's not there currently. That's only 0.4% of the total capacity of that system. So it's honestly very, very minor. So we're not going to flood anything worse than what's currently done. And your question that goes to the
Flooding now, you understand that?
I understand that, but so with the air gap and stuff, if you're worried about additional water getting in your basement, if the water ever gets up this high, you're already in your window wells at your basement. You have much worse problems than anything coming back in through the infrastructure that we just installed through that particular thing. So I hope that answers your question for that.
Well, I want to comment that just, these heavy storms, like a week or so.
So we gotta have a microphone, sorry, I know it's inconvenient, but.
We just had heavy rains like a week and a half ago, if you recall, for like, a good 2 days, right? I walked out to the street, we're on a corner, I walked out and looked at the drain. The water was within 2.5, 3 feet of the grate already. And that's with footings connected to the sewer.
So if you were looking in a catch basin, generally there's always going to be a little bit of water in there. Those have kind of like little sumps in there where they help collect sand and road debris and things like that to help it from getting into the pipes themselves. So the city will go through and maintain those, clean those out from time to time. So you're always going to see a little bit of water in that.
This was flowing water within 3 feet of the grate. And that did not make it warm and fuzzy. It's on the street, on the curb.
Well, the other thing to note is that generally from those storm grates out to the storm pipe in the street is generally very shallow infrastructure. So it's not very deep. It's not like you're looking down there and saying, oh, geez, the pipe is 7 feet deep and this is only 2 feet from the surface.
That's where our drain. That's where the sump pump water is going to go.
They would tie into either those gratings or a back of curb piping that would lead into those and then ultimately into the storm sewer system.
And they're going to handle that?
Yeah, and we'll model that in depth when we get to it. So, but we've already done the cursory review of it.
One comment relative to this system is that some of the houses in our neighborhood do not have a storm sewer as what you've indicated.
Correct.
And in that case, you're saying you're going with the curbside connection. All right, those curbside connections have been problematic in other cities where FDDs were implemented. And this system, if it plugs off, then it just starts overflowing right there, and then that water goes right back into your footing drains, and the sump pump runs continuously and doesn't do anything. If you really want that to work, that needs to be out in your yard 10 feet from the house or further. Otherwise, you're just circulating water with your sump pump.
Yeah, so if this pipe out to the road were to plug, it'd be going in a circle. But I can't comment on the other cities that have their storm sewer piping that hasn't worked at the back of curb. In Grand Rapids, it was successful. In the city of Granville, it was successful that we were able to do it like that and get that piping to flow. So,
Did you mean these cities have the pipes discharge onto the curb, like through the curb wall? Because these would be actual pipes buried in the ground connected to the catch basin.
We have a lot of trees here, and those get plugged up in the fall.
Okay.
Always.
Just double checking that.
It will happen.
Yeah, I understand there's other, around the other parts of the city, the foundation drains are connected to the sewer system. So you're not going to charge those people the same fees you're trying to charge us. That's clear discrimination. And you're asking for us to file lawsuits against the city because of discriminating of people living in this area. That's one point. Second point is, when you put this program together, it was called a test program or an experiment. But for political reasons, you've changed the terminology. It is a test program. That's what you defined when you originally put it together. So I suggest that everyone here not disconnect, and then we can sue the city when you attempt to blackmail us with those fines or prevent the sale of our property. I mean, this is clear discrimination. I said that before your city attorney laughed at me. So I talked to other attorneys, and they agree. So you need to understand, we're not going to go away. It's time we said no to you bureaucrats, petty politicians, and paid consultants. You work for us. We don't work for you. You need to understand that.
All right, just a reminder, these are to answer questions.
Yeah, but this is still a free nation when we have the right to speak at a public meeting.
This is for your benefit to answer questions that you may have about your home.
Okay, $30,000 is what they're estimating to do my home, because we have a furnished lower level. A lot of other people here do too. Your $7,500 is insignificant versus the cost we're going to have to bear after we've just spent millions of dollars because other bureaucrats didn't hold Boise to the standards that had been set by the state. So don't give me this BS you've been giving me. This is what happened, and now you want us to spend $30,000, tear up our yards, probably have to tear up a number of driveways coming in to implement this program. So don't tell us this $7,500 is going to come anyways near close to covering the cost for you guys.
I've got a solution to that problem that you're saying there, and I'm in agreement with where you're coming from. I heard two different statements, and my question kind of is, I want you to confirm for me, was I getting this correctly? The first statement was, bigger pumps never solve any problems. And the part is, some pumps are great and no problems, and we've already heard that. Then I heard from the second gentleman that if none of us participate, they're going to have to upgrade the Moorland pump station, and they're going to have to do the waste treatment plant, which is the right solution. Now, that's what I heard. Now, I was in front of the council several weeks ago, and I told them, the city council, I'm not participating. And I'm encouraging all of you not to participate. You will be no worse off than what you are today. And we heard that. There's no guarantee that this is going to work. So did I hear what you were saying correctly? That if nobody participates, you'll have to upgrade the Moorland pump station and the wastewater treatment plant in order to stay viable?
The cost of that would be astronomical.
Astronomical? Do you really take us for stupid people? Astronomical?
So if anything, between the pump
Astronomical.
station The
Okay,
pipes
everybody
in the plant.
hear that. They've
You're-
made a number of statements which have been misleading, okay? And I understand, as I told the council, this is all personal to us because it's impacting our homes, okay? You put a sump pump in your basement, you are opening an avenue for additional water to your basement. Okay, so again, I just encourage you not to participate. I am not participating. Okay, I don't think anyone should. They said that the Grand Rapids was a huge success, but there was a 30% dissatisfaction rate when they surveyed that. That's what they said. Now they're going to change it. See, every time I come up with a point, they change it because I was in the meeting and I heard 30% dissatisfaction.
I was at Grand Rapids, and I've been in this industry for 42 years. There was not a 30% dissatisfaction rate in Grand Rapids. There's 100% satisfaction because we wouldn't pay the contractors until the people were satisfied with the work. And even if you go and improve the downstream infrastructure now and spend that 50, 60 million, I see in the permits around the state that 275 gallons per day per capita going into permits for plants like Jared runs. So that would mean 10 years out or 15 years out when that hit your permit, it would be just like in the 80s or probably the 90s here when they said that y'all had to disconnect all your roof drains from the sanitary sewer. And then it becomes a requirement. Instead of like a program like this for the entire city.
Not just one part of the city.
And this part is being focused on because it's a priority 1 area and there's basement flooding occurring. It's not a test program.
That's what you called it. It's what they called it in the original documents.
I think they called it a pilot program in the original documents. But
I have a question about the backflow preventers. Can you, I'm a chemical engineer by training and stuff, and we tended not to rely on backflow preventers very much. Sure. So can you talk a little bit about the effective performance of these based on your experience? And then the second question is, if those were installed, would they be installed within the home or between the home and the street? Thank you.
okay, and my position at Grand Rapids, we installed these quite often. They were highly successful, they worked really well if people checked them once or twice a year. Those people that set them and forget them, sometimes they had issues with them, with things being with them. And typically they're right in the basement, right by your other clean out where you can go down and get at them. Typically there's room there to put them.
One second, I got the mic's down here.
Okay, so I had two questions that are hopefully pretty quick. The first would be, if the installation of the back of curb piping for those houses that don't have a storm sewer requires disturbing driveways, is repairing that damage going to be covered by the program?
When I installed them in Grand Rapids, those behind the curbs, the contractors were able to get under most of the driveways, just shoot under them without disturbing the driveways.
Okay.
And if they are disturbed, I'm sure they'll be replaced by the city.
Okay. And then I just wanted to ask if the city would consider, I know you're going to vet certain contractors. If we can find someone else who's not on the approved list who can do the work for a comparable cost, is there an option to do that, or?
In other communities, we've allowed that.
Okay.
As long as they meet the scope, sorry. In other communities, we've allowed that as long as they can meet the scope, and again, it needs to be certified by, the inspector that it was done appropriately and properly within the plumbing codes and stuff. But if you know a local contractor who's insured and you feel comfortable with them doing the work and stuff, then I don't see any reason why we wouldn't allow that. Again, we're going to have a program manager with that a lot of these questions can go specific to your house after the initial plumbing inspector or the person gets in there and checks things out. So that's where I'd direct you at that point.
Dennis Fear, 5613 Berry Court. I'm not objecting to the plan, but we don't have any storm sewer on our court. There's 3 or 4 houses that would discharge into it, but I have a whole side yard that's big, that needs to get drained. So I'm concerned that they're not going to make the thing big enough. Who do I communicate with to make sure that they've taken all that into account?
So if I'm understanding, your side yard doesn't drain well?
No, Duck Haven.
That's generally not included with the program, but again, that
Well,
would
no,
be
I'm
something
not
you could talk
asking
to
them
the
to
city
include
about,
it, but I'm asking them to take into account the amount of water that's going to be added into that storm sewer that's not coming from the houses.
Correct, yeah. So again, that in those specific instances, again, we haven't done any surveying or anything out there at this point yet, but we would need to take a look at that and
Well,
see
should I
if
just-
we think something else is going to be contributing to that, then we need to take that into account.
Should I just communicate with the city engineer, or?
Correct.
I mean, you know, if nobody knows about it, it's not there now, so why would they allow for it?
He's got one down here, Steve.
I'm Bart Jones from 4201 Moorland. We're downstream from the pump station. Are we included in the program? We're not colored.
Then no.
Could you show that map? Would you show the map?
Yeah, I think the question he's asking, there's other people, anytime you're at like where the end of the
There.
line is, or if you're close to the pump station, it's not always clear where the house connects into the sanitary.
We're right at the intersection there of Moorland and C4201. There, right there.
Here?
Yeah. Are we part of the program?
No. Your house is not identified in this one, so.
I don't get charged. I have no choice there. Participate or not participate.
If you want to participate, that's something we can talk to the city about, but when we did all the estimates and everything, your house was not included, so.
Yeah, the biggest concern I've got is expressed earlier is that if I'm on board for $90 a month, 800 feet from you people aren't on the hook for $900 a month or $90 a month, and that isn't fair. Since I participated, it's not an issue for me.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a participator and I see the people just on the other side of Karen, they get a freebie. But
Yeah.
my water costs $9 a month.
Yeah.
Since I'm not a participant,
Yeah, you're not going to have any surcharge or anything.
to the west of me, or to the west of me, they are. Okay, I don't.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, this is a very interesting issue, and I appreciate you gentlemen's efforts and time, and especially Steve. You happened to be locked out, but when you signed on, you probably didn't know that Council 3 representation have this much fun and games. Since this is a Q&A, I'm not going to raise your blood pressure anymore, because I'll spare the reiteration of my earlier comments about the words like a root cause, Band-Aid, pilot plan being a guinea pig program, and holistic approach citywide and so on. But here is a question. Q&A number 9 says this is a first project. That means it's going to be citywide eventually, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
The council will have to
Yeah.
look at that and evaluate that whether
Yeah.
they want to implement it citywide.
But there's one comment I will reiterate. That is, when this happens, before any of these people choose to disconnect, I think the city council should take the leadership. Maybe mayor ought to be the first. If she doesn't have, she has to disconnect, to start the program to show us how we can go check out the yard, how much dug up it will be. So it's good to know that it's going to be a citywide eventually. My question is, assuming that I'm going to be the first one to disconnect, because I believe in overachieving in anything you do, let's say. What's your timing? And also, what about, we happen to live in Briarwood. Brian Mears, he lives at the end of the court. Where do you connect to a pipe which does not exist? So what is the timing? When is this a magic $94.24 fine per month comes in?
We're right above the D. The line that goes to the D is what Sam.
Yeah, right, yeah, that area.
Yep.
There's no storm sewer.
You gotta dump into the street and it goes to the culvert.
Yeah, so we're not going to dump into the street. So
Which it floats up, which it
if
did.
our map is incorrect and there's no storm sewer there,
Yeah.
then we would do back of curb piping.
There is no storm sewer.
So will city install, I mean, this is a genuine question. Will city first install a
Yes.
storm connection?
Yep, so
To
the
the
storm
Briarwood
pipe would be
Court.
installed first, and then that would give you the ability to connect to
Yeah,
that.
because
So-
my address is Briarwood Court.
Yep.
So I
So
will
you-
be connecting to that one.
Yeah, so we
Until
would-
then,
Yeah,
so what's the timing on that one? What's your timeline?
So we provide the infrastructure first. So the timing of this is the city council still has to approve the program in totality, go through the process of implementing the
Yeah.
correct ordinances in order to do this and stuff. So, that's a little bit of a ways off. The SRF program that's going to help pay for all of this, the city is on the priority list, but they still need to go through the exercise of actually doing all the design and getting that funding available to be spent, right? So that's probably a good year off by the time all of that stuff gets complete. And then with the SRF program, you'd need to have most of that money spent within a 3-year time period. So in general, we've got all of the Concept 5 infrastructure that needs to get put in place, but as far as the footing drain program goes, it's probably about a 3-year timeline before this is all complete. And then, so
Okay.
that's kind of what we're looking for.
So since we have this map, a few more follow-up, please. Those people who have a readily available storm sewer to which the disconnected sewer pipe can get connected to, where do you start this timing-wise? Where does it gonna start? In looking at the map, guessing, but I mean it's intelligent guess. Because you're not going to require any of us to connect into pipe that doesn't exist. You're going to put that in first. That's logical. Even if I say, I want to be the first, you're going to say, sit down, relax, okay?
Yep.
So when are you going to be doing that and how long it's going to take? And everybody's radio station is turned into WIIFM. What's in it for me? When do I have to do this actually and start shelling out whether it's illegal or not? I'm with you, Bruce, but let's say, assume it's illegal, that we're going to pay $94.24, because I want to know that, because I might be end up being in a die now and disconnect later program. Because if you delay long enough, it's a moot point in terms of any of us, because we might be gone. But it's not going to be that long, meaning it's not decades, but it's years.
Yeah.
So give us some idea of timing. Let's forget, cost is there, and maybe Mr. Biden might help us and so on.
So again, generally, we need to get the infrastructure.
Where would you
at
start
your
and,
house or in front of your house
Yeah.
in order for you to connect to. So once that happens, let's just say that's about a year from now when that happens, right? So then at that point, you would be able to enter the program. I would suggest that as soon as the plumber is available and we've selected those 6 plumbers, get them in your house as soon as you can to take a look and see whether you have it. Let's get that estimate. Let's figure it out. Because what if your whole entire cul-de-sac there doesn't have any footing drains? Well, then there's no reason for the city to put any infrastructure there. So ideally, we know as much as we can before we start putting pipes in the ground. So that being said, we do need to get the pipes in the ground before it goes. And then once that happens, then the clock will start. And
So timing for paying fines,
yeah.
$94.24.
So the timing of that is once the program is eligible So let's say we have the sewer in front of your house, the program is eligible, and you could participate at that point in time. We understand we're probably going to go, segments by segments. Ideally, again, this isn't finalized yet, but the ideal situation is we kind of start on the downstream end and work our way back up. And work to disconnect those people first, and then work our way back upstream. So
Yeah.
There'll probably be segments of the neighborhood that are identified as the first priority. Those people will get contacted by the plumbers. Once those inspections have begun in that particular segment of the neighborhood, then the clock begins.
Yeah, a bit more procure, but people in the Briarwood Court and end of that, the Oak Ridge to the Dublin area where there's no storm, we are not eligible until we have some storm, some place, so it's not going to allow us discharge on the surface.
Yeah,
So we got to
the infrastructure needs to be in place
and
first.
anxiously wait for that great moment, and sounds like that's years away.
I have a couple more questions. Was it not mentioned in an earlier meeting that sometime either during this program or after this program is finished, the city was going to change their ordinances that required a disconnect at every sale of a home in Midland?
That was discussed. No ordinances have been passed yet, but that
Okay.
was discussed as part of this to do a point of sale ordinance, correct?
So that is still being seriously looked into, because if that were passed, that might make what we have to go through a lot more palatable to us to see that now the whole city is being brought into this. Because it's real easy for other council members or other citizens of the city to say, yeah, make them do this. We're the ones having to do it. They're not. But this point of sale disconnect is going to wake a lot of people up. And so that's still seriously being looked at?
Yes.
Yeah, those are one of the things we haven't discussed. Even the fines have not been put in place yet. I mean, in terms of when you put it, when the city council has not decided that. That would be a city
Okay.
council decision.
Another quick question, just for my clarification. You got the $20,000 estimate and the $7,500 estimate. Is the 75 part of the 20?
Correct. So the 7,500 would be considered homeowner infrastructure on the private property. The remainder of that to the 20 grand mark was going to be to put that storm sewer system in the street.
Which is 12.5. Why even show that per home when the homeowner had nothing to do with that 12.5? I mean, to me, that
Yeah,
confuses
and
the whole
I think
thing.
that was more of, as we were presenting to council, to show where we came up with the estimates and things like that.
And just to clarify, you're saying that 12.5 is for the outlawn area only, or does it bring the pipe to the house for the connection of the plumber?
So generally, the 7,500 would cover house plus running a small diameter, and we're talking like a 2-inch line out to the back of curb piping or to the storm sewer system or whatever,
So that piping underground to the outlawn and through whatever landscape and trees, or whatever might be out there, is on the homeowner and part of the 7,500.
Correct.
So when somebody gets a quote from a plumber, they're not picking up a lot of that disturbance in their front yard.
The plumber should be looking at that and trying to find the most efficient route to try and meet that.
Well, a lot of people have a lot of landscape, and they have flower gardens, and they have bushes and shrubs. If they have to plow right through that, the 7,500 is meant to help make them whole on that. So it's not just a plumber cost. It could be a landscaper.
Correct.
Could be a concrete guy. It could be all of that.
Yep.
Okay. One other point of clarification. I didn't build my house. I bought it new. I'm assuming everything under my basement concrete floor is, you have floor drains and you have sanitary sewer lines. That's all that's under there, and they are a common system. In other words, when this gets separated at my foundation, I'm not going to find that I have a toilet that was put in on the clean out of the wheat tile. I mean, is that
I mean,
Is that possible?
I can't speak to
I
your,
mean, the
to your house
assumption
and how it
is
was built, so I really
that
don't
the
know.
floor drains and all the, under the concrete lines are
I
sanitary
would hope you
sewer
wouldn't
lines.
find that, but I don't know.
Is that something that the plumber checks out? I mean,
I think if that's something that you in particular
I'm not
are
worried about it, but
then
I just
it
thought,
would-
I don't know what's under there for sure. I have a bathroom in my basement that was added by the prior owner. I don't know what kind of work they did.
Yeah.
And that's what got me thinking about it.
Yeah, and I can't comment on that.
Any recommendation on whether people should?
If you have any reason to believe that's a concern, you can always have the plumber snake that line as well, so, yeah.
The prior owner did the work, did beautiful work, but where they actually connected under that concrete.
I don't think this gentleman can answer that. My suggestion would be, you might get on your knees and pray. Hope for the best.
Let's move on to the next question.
Move to the next question. Go ahead.
I live at 5805 Woodbridge, and I never got a letter about this meeting. I just got an email from my councilman. I'm just trying to verify that I am part of the program.
It does not appear so. 5805.
Yeah, Woodbridge splits, right? We've got some of it that comes down, some of it goes, when it turns into Bramble Ridge,
Yeah.
it goes into the Moorland pump station, but then up there's a point in time where, a point on the street where it goes down Woodbridge and comes in below the pump station. So I think.
This is just storm sewer shown on there, so.
No, but I think that's.
We should have the property address.
No, there is, the line split, right out.
Yeah, you're right here.
Right there.
5805.
That's me right there.
Yeah.
It's the line, the sanitary sewer line, which one you push?
The red one.
Yeah, it's right around here somewhere, right around Sutton's place. The lines go this way, and they go that way. So if you're over here, what you're doing is and these aren't the sanitary sewer lines, but if you're coming down here below the Moorland pump station and coming over and connecting to Perrin. So right around here is where some neighbors go this way, some neighbors go that way. Not entirely clear to me all the time based on the maps I've seen, but you should not be part of the program this time.
Is this project going to relieve those homes that are not included? Are we going to see any benefit at all? Or are we still going to have a 17 flood? Forget the flood. We still going to have a 17 risk? Those that are not part of the program, west of Perrin?
So if you're like on Perrin?
If we're not, west of Perrin, north of Moorland, not part of the program. Are we still all at risk? Are we still all at risk?
Okay, I'm still a little confused here. Am I part of the program or not part of the program?
It appears that you are not, no.
I flooded in 17, I had sewer backup in 17
So
and in 20.
a reason
Why would
for
I
that
not be
could
part of
be
the program?
the Moorland force main connects right here at Perrin. So all of that extra flow that's being pumped, all that clean water, is trying to get down this pipe, and so is your sewage that's flowing by gravity. So
One of the things about Concept 5, so one of the parts of this program, we're focusing on the floating drain disconnect, but it's also we're also expanding the pipe size on Perrin, right? So what that's going to do is that's going to help to take pressure off from a backup perspective. That's not part of this discussion today, but.
25-year flood?
I mean,
17?
was
Because it's 88 years flood.
88 years. So we still would have water even though your system is designed for 25, it should be. You're going to take it to 25 under Perrin Road. So those of us not part of the program, west of Perrin, are still at risk for a 17 flood. We would still see water in our basements. If it was 88
You'd be at risk, yes.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I've got a second question still.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I'm not part of the program, but I already had a backflow preventer put in. Am I eligible to get reimbursed for that?
You didn't put something.
Under the framework for the FDDP as it stands right now, no, you would not be.
Why not? I flooded. I had sewer backup. I'm doing this to protect myself.
This goes back to the designated priority 1 areas. If you're not part of that area, you're not part of the program. As it stands currently, today as we speak right now.
Okay, I'm not part of the program. I was hoping to come away from this meeting feeling warm and fuzzy about that the storm sewer water is going to be taken care of. And I'm not really warm and fuzzy feeling yet. Are you guys pretty sure that you're going to be able to take care of all this extra water that's going to get dumped out in front of my house?
Are you getting warm at least?
I'm not.
So we can go back to the slide that shows the storm sewer capacity, which was Brian covered earlier. Just double down on that one more time.
Yeah, so in order to verify the program, we did check that the storm sewer is capable of handling that additional water. And again, it's only 0.4% of the total capacity. So again, if it's already flooded, it's not going to add anything to it. If it's not flooded, it won't add enough to flood it. Let's put it that way. It's 0.4%. So if you
my Woodbridge flooded last year, but I did not have overland flooding into my house. I had
So
backup.
this would not cause anything additional to what you saw previously.
How could that be?
The
water from the street goes into the storm sewer, doesn't it?
It's a small amount in comparison. So your contribution, or the footing drain disconnect contribution into the storm sewer system is a minor amount in comparison with everything else that runs through the storm system. So it's not going to create any additional problems.
I'm still not warm and fuzzy.
Mine's real quick. Again, the point that I wanted to make, this question's directed to you, Steve, and I don't mean to give you a hard time. I know you're a good person. I know you're trying to do the right thing. But what do you plan on saying to people who, as a result of this project, get their basements flooded? As a result of putting in this sump pump and get water in? And then I've got another question. What do you plan on saying to those people who believe these consultants when there is clearly a better solution than what they're proposing here? What are you going to say to the residents who get their basement flooded as a result of this project? Because you know it is going to happen. It absolutely will happen. People will get water in their basement who wouldn't if they hadn't done this. If they do this, they'll get water in their basement that they wouldn't have got had they not done this. What are you going to say to them?
Well, let me just speak from personal experience. No, I'm gonna answer it because I've lived here. I moved here moved back here in about 1992. I have a house that was built in 87, 88. It's got a sump pump. I've had the sump pump fail. I've had power outages. What I have done is I bought a battery backup system and I put it in the crock. I have a little mini generator that I crank up when the power goes out. But so do all my neighbors. I didn't have that at first. I lived quote dangerously for a while. And when it floods, I clean it up. It's stormwater. It's not a pleasant experience. I take that into account in terms of the system I have versus the improvements that I make in my basement. If I had a fancier basement, I'd have a double sump pump system. I'd have a backup generator, whole house backup generator, and I'd be fine. Look, we've been building houses since '87 in this town with sump pump technology. This is the way, if you were to build a house today, you'd have to do it. If you lived outside the city limits, you would have a sump pump in order to keep your footing. So this is not, to the point about it being experimental, pilot, whatever you want to say. This is something that, for the last 30 years we've been doing here in Midland. So it's like anything else. We've moved on with technology. Houses don't have asbestos in there, even though you might buy a house with asbestos. It might have lead paint in it, even though you no longer have that. But you buy into these things, technology and the building codes all change. I go back to what we're trying to do here. This is going to have a benefit for the city, but it's also going to have a benefit for your neighborhoods. Your house didn't, Brian, and you're just by luck of where you live in the system. By plan. Okay, by plan. You're a lot smarter. You're a lot smarter than a lot of other people.
Okay. Make
But
sure there was no asbestos. Make sure there was no lead paint. Make sure that the codes when it was built.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're coming in and changing the rules.
Well, just like, it was fine to have lead pipes, it was, but then things changed, right? You're asking me what I would say. And so what I'm saying is the houses have improved their technology. What we're asking here is that we improve the technology of these houses. We improve what we're doing as far as the environment is concerned. We don't treat stormwater. Regulations are getting more strict. We're trying to figure out what to do in this neighborhood and what to do across the city to reduce backup.
Even when there's a better solution.
Well, I don't know that there is a better solution right now based upon everything that I've heard. That's my judgment call as a city councilman.
Absolutely.
Okay? You might have, if you were a city councilman, you might have a different judgment call. I'm giving you what, after a year, well, actually since 2017, I've been trying to encourage the city to take actions to do something to reduce sewage backup in this city. I mean, really, sewage backup is really not acceptable. So we're trying to do something. I think, based on what I've heard as a city councilman, that this is a viable solution. We understand it makes your personal lives perhaps miserable, hopefully not. And we're trying to take steps to minimize that. So what we're here is to try and figure out and to listen to you. And I know some people are expressing frustration, but it's try and listen to the questions you've got about your house so we can further take actions to further minimize the impact on your homes, but still achieve the result of no sewage backup. That's kind of why we're here tonight. That's why we want to ask. That's why if you've got questions, please ask them. If you don't. Okay, all right, sorry, but you gave me the mic, so.
You answered the first question. His first answer was that he doesn't care what happens to you. He believes what he's doing is right, which I totally respect. He's been led by some people, and they've had experience in other areas. I've got 40 years of experience working with Dow, and I've seen that this is not the best solution. And that's the reason why I'm not participating. And again, I'm encouraging everyone not to participate because I heard this gentleman here say they will do the right solution. Now, the answer on that was he said the cost would be astronomical. If you believe anybody tells you the costs are astronomical, that's ridiculous.
Hey, real quick, folks, real quick. Hey, can I just clarify something? This is a Q&A.
My second question.
This isn't a get in your soapbox and go off.
Right.
There's a lot of folks in here that might have questions that haven't asked them yet. Okay, so let's just ask questions. Appreciate that.
My second question is, you made the comment earlier that we could not design the waste treatment plant to handle all of the flow that we're going to it. And you said you can't design it for normal operation as well as overflow operation. Am I correct in that?
Just paraphrasing a bit, but sure.
Okay. Can't you design a system where you have one part of the plant that handles normal operation and then you have an overflow section for when you get those big rains and then it opens up into that overflow section? Isn't that a solution? And I'll give the microphone back.
We already have an EQ basin, but it's still not equipped to handle the amount of I&I that we have.
Expand it, right? So that you have normal.
Footprint-wise, honestly, I don't think we could. If you drive by the plant on Bay City Road, you can see it. It's above the ground. Holds about how many million gallons, Bruce? 43.5 million gallons. And honestly, I don't think, and I'm not an engineer, but maybe Brian can speak to it, we have any more capacity to add additional storage at the facility.
Okay. Anybody who has not asked a question want to have the opportunity? Let me walk around.
It's a very good question.
So we want to make sure that you're talking to the microphone. The question is the timeline. I'm going to hand that over to Brian.
Yeah, the question was estimated timeline for the program. I tried to get into that a little bit earlier. So generally what we're looking at is we've probably got 6 months to a year of work to do in terms of finalizing all the program elements with the city council, allowing them to approve it, get the ordinances in place, and then ultimately we've got to put some of the infrastructure in the ground. So that's about a year out. And then ultimately with the SRF who is funding this, that's a state revolving fund through Eagle, they've got about a 3-year timeline to spend that money that's been allocated for the program. So again, assuming the city chooses to take that money and chooses to take these steps, you're probably talking between 1 and 4 years for total completion.
And when will you have a list of approved plumbers?
So the question was about the list of approved plumbers. That's probably in the next 3 to 6 months, depending on city council timing in terms of how they want to proceed with that. So,
I have the microphone. Thank you. Assuming that our costs will be above the 7,500, I'm totally resigned to that fact and am willing to pay beyond that 7,500. Will there be a mechanism in place to do that reasonably efficiently and effectively? It sounds a bit bureaucratic, this business of having to call in a second plumber who might be able to do it for 7,500 or not. You know, what if we want to put in the Cadillac of whatever in order to protect ourselves?
yeah, so again, we've tried to outline some of the program elements that would be covered underneath that $7,500. If there are program elements that we've outlined that go above and beyond that $7,500, generally what you would do is call the program manager. At this point, I'm just going to point to Jared and say, you call Jared and say, hey, Jared, I got this quote from the plumber. Everything he's given me is within the program allowed expenses, but it's $12,000. And he would look at that and say, all right, well, here's the quote from the plumber, look at it, and then he could approve that or not approve that, depending on what it is. Now, again, that being said, if there's certain programs elements and it is covered and it can be done for a certain dollar amount and you want additional things, we talked about the battery backup, we talked about the water pumps, all the bells and whistles, belt and suspenders. Again, that is up to the homeowner on what they do. If you decide to, if the plumber says, the most efficient routing is to go through this way, and it's not going to, tear up your landscaping very bad, but you really want it over here for whatever reason, again, that's your decision, and you could pay that additional cost if you so choose.
I was just wondering how it was determined, the houses that you explained, how it's split on Woodbridge, and then I'm on the corner of Partridge.
Sure.
How did you determine who was going to be within this project and who wasn't, even though we all flooded?
Yeah, so I mean, the whole neighborhood was identified as a priority one, but the houses that are most likely to have a footing drain are the ones that were built prior to that 1987 mark. So it may be that your home was built in 1992.
Mine was the first house in the whole area.
Okay.
So in the 60s.
Sewer split. Only the houses that put in Moorland lift station are.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
The commonality.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Is where your the commonality is where your sewer lines go to. Mm-hmm. And so the people who are included in the program, all of their sanitary sewer lines go to the Moorland pump station.
Okay.
Depending on where you live, especially some of these areas we pointed out earlier, you might not go to the Moorland pump station. You might directly go into that line that runs down Perrin and goes into Valley.
Okay.
So that's the connection. Even though you might, be within stone's throw of another neighbor that is connected, mm-hmm. your house would not because of the way your sewer lines for your particular house run.
Okay, so even though we flood the same as everyone else, are we ever going to see a project that's going to help us?
Yeah. Let me just comment. As I stated out front, I represent Ward 3, which is basically everything west of Eastman. I can assure you that neighbors between Sturgeon and Eastman had a lot of flooding going on, a lot of sewer backup. They are in the same boat as you are in terms of, they're having to rely on, sewer, linings and manhole cover improvements and basically much more minor things with the hope that might lessen the next time this happens. Probably something more drastic, something more significant needs to be done to really protect those houses and other houses along Perrin and so forth in the future. But, right now, that's why Moorland was identified as a priority one. It's thought that we could actually make a significant difference and a significant improvement to these houses to really reduce, if not eliminate, the sewage backup. That's just as simple as it is.
So from your particular home, and if you go this way down into to Perrin there, we are going to be improving that infrastructure as part of the Concept 5 that the council approved. And so the pipes basically from here all the way down
to the Valley Lift Station, which is downstream of that, are all getting improved, upsized, and taken care of as part of this. So again, with the intent of lowering the hydraulic water level in there to below the top of pipe. So that's all been modeled.
But we still will flood if the 17 happens again.
All right, I'll let you two guys.
I don't know your particular house
Most of us were not part of the program, west of Perry. We will still flood if 17 happens again.
I don't know that.
Honestly, the hope is that other changes we're making in the system, because you eventually go back, and even your property will go into Valley, that the changes we're making in the system will reduce the likelihood of flooding. It won't eliminate it.
See, you're taking it to a 25-year standard, which I understand. It was an 88 flood, right? In 17?
You know, honestly, we're doing it one step at a time. We're trying to take as much of a bite off as we can. We've had that debate. There's some questions up there.
Brian, actually, you should answer that question as to why you're not doing something beyond the 25 year again.
Yeah, so that's your question was, why aren't we going above and beyond the 25-year 24-hour storm event and what the sewers are supposed to handle for that? That's an Eagle standard. That's what they hold us engineers to. If we go above and beyond that, Jared did mention some of the side effects that could happen, as well as the potential for them not to even permit that infrastructure improvement. So those are several reasons. That's what you're referring to, correct, Brad?
Yeah, this is a question for the consultants. Normally, if footing drains are put in to deal with water that falls on a house, or water that would be in the ground level that would be that high. And there are homes in Midland that have sump pumps that side by side, one runs all the time and one doesn't run very frequently. And that happens in areas where part of the subsoil is sandy versus parts of the soil that are primarily clay. So when you came up with this calculation for 200 homes that needed to be connected in order to solve the problem, if you went around and surveyed and looked at all of the 200 homes that you had, if they had guttering that was directed away from the house, how do you know how much of a reduction that you're going to get? It was done based on a model, but I don't have a lot of faith in that model.
Sure. So the model was calibrated to various storm events. So Bruce and his crews set up monitors within the sanitary system to record those rain events. So to record what it is during dry weather, and then record what happens when you get 1/10 of an inch of rain, 2.5 inches of rain, and during that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I believe that you actually captured a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. So, and so anyway, that's how that model's calibrated. So we feel pretty confident in those numbers. Now again, every house is going to be different. You're absolutely correct, right? We are taking this neighborhood and somewhat generalizing it and averaging it out to say we need this level of participation. Some homes are going to contribute more, some homes are going to contribute less. But again, we need to try and drive that participation to make sure that we can meet those goals. And I don't know how to do that on a house-by-house basis. So
the other question I have is the cheapest option for emergency backup, and it's still allowed in the city, is a hydraulic jet system, basically, where you educt water from your footing drains. And in the Moorland district, that should not be acceptable because our problem is primarily because we can't drain stormwater out of the Inman drain fast enough. And what happens is that the water table, I think, backs up, because my house has never had water up to it, but it's been backflow from sewer 3 different times. Mm-hmm. So if you add more water to the amount that you're putting in the storm sewer, it only compounds the problem.
But what? Go ahead.
I know it's 1 to 3. as far as how much it takes out as to how much it adds to the system. That water must go, that flow of that additional water coming from the water system must go to the Inman drain in our neighborhood. That's the only place it can go. So if you're going to allow that kind of backup, you're only compounding the problem in our neighborhood.
So the backup that you experienced was through your sanitary system, right? Not through overland flooding or through your window wells or anything like that.
Right.
It was from the sanitary system, and that's what we're trying to address. Once we can get that sanitary system free of all this excess water, now you can gravity drain out of it and get into the sanitary system and let the pump station do what it's supposed to do. That overland flooding or the Inman drain does, while it would contribute potentially to groundwater levels and maybe make your sump pump run more often, it's not going to back up your sanitary system.
I have a suspicion in surveying the neighborhood as I walk around, and I do a lot of that in the neighborhood, that most of the houses have proper guttering and flow away from the house. So I don't see that as you're going to get the reduction that you think you are. And the other thing is the fact that if I look at the 3 different times that I've been flooded, it's been successively worse each time. And there's been a lot more development on that side of town that is also flooding, increasing the flow through the Inman drain. So I don't have much faith that this will solve the problem. And the other point I'd like to make is I agree that this is the way that houses should be built, but putting a sump pump in a retrofit is not the same as putting a sump and designing a house for a sump system. And other cities have experienced problems. I've done an investigation in places that it has been successful, and places where they've given up on it after being into the program for several years. Detroit's one of them. Ann Arbor's one of them. Lansing's one of them. So
Ann Arbor stopped their program because they actually did get enough people to participate to experience the success that they needed to take care of some of their sanitary sewer backups. Getting the water out, again, is a solution to what you experience with your particular house. And I understand your point about the development, but any of the things that are developed now should have fairly tight sewers, and we're not talking about the storm system and the overland flooding. We're talking about not getting flooding of sanitary in your basement.
I'm saying that's contributing to the problem, and the other thing is that you're planning to there's obviously some other problems in the system, breakage, inflow into the system that's not coming from footing drains.
Yes.
Because you're going to address that supposedly with sewer lining things.
Correct.
So maybe you should correct those problems first before going after all 200 homes.
So to that point, one of the comments was about other areas of I&I and other things that are getting into the system through pipes and things like that. So generally what you'd do is you'd see that during a dry weather flow. If the water table's high and you have pipes that have broken or weeping joints or things like that, you generally see that in this 49 gallons a minute orange number here. But what we saw during the modeling with the sewers, the actual monitors in the sewer, is that was increased, to 982 gallons a minute, and that's a pretty quick spike on those charts. And so it's not groundwater that's getting in through weeping pipes. It's stuff that's coming down and getting right into the sewers. So that's how we identified that. And yes, there is a program in place as part of that Concept 5 to help line some of those pipes, address some of the other issues that aren't specifically related to the footing drain disconnections.
Is that one measurement, or is that over time?
I'll let you comment on that, Mike.
So the sewer meters were in, and they collected data, I think, at 15-minute increments. And during a rain event, we can see them peaks. And the first peak you typically see is if you have roof drains or catch basins or something tied into a sanitary sewer, because that's a direct connection. That shows you a big peak. and we actually call that part of an R3 triangle. And the next one you see are them things that are a little bit less direct. So footing drains and other things like that is another triangle we draw on that to show us where that water is coming from. And then the weepers and the seepers that you're talking about in the sewer system is that third triangle, the elongated one that comes after the storm and lasts longer. So we can see them in the sewer flow and the models we develop when we do that. We're confident where that water is coming from. We did. We modeled it for multiple months. We had sewer meters in, and you can see the flow.
Steve, I want to clarify, from your own experiences, it sounded like you went from potentially, quote, living dangerously to a whole house solution with potential multiple basins. I mean, you want to make sure that you are pretty much, that sump's going to be running no matter what is going to happen electrically. I just want to clarify that it sounds like the additional cost to every homeowner that participates here is going to be easily $5,000 in terms of generators and footings and other implementations to make sure you have a true uninterruptible power source. Because if there's any chance of that thing being interrupted, your house is going to fill up.
Yeah, let me just clarify from a personal perspective. I have one crock. I have a battery backup sump pump that I installed myself. It cost me about $500. I got it from Lowe's. I have this other gas-powered unit that I use, just to keep my refrigerator going. And if the battery, because the battery goes after a couple days, it depends on how hard it's pumping. Other people I know have full house systems. I do not. So, but I went many years with, my house did not fill up. It, there's where you find out is where your low spots are and where the water comes in. Hopefully that's not in a finished section, but that's no different than anybody else. Yeah. But I mean, on the other hand, I did not have any sewer backup.
Right. I have to remind everybody that I live on Oak Ridge. Our entire neighborhood, their contents of their homes was on the curb in 2017. The entire neighborhood. So, as much as I hope this works, I too do not feel excessively warm and fuzzy. Literally, our entire neighborhood, their homes were on the curb after the horrible flooding in 17. I've been talking about 20.
Yeah, the question I'm about to ask is related, but it's a different topic. If our goal, which you gentlemen worked so long and so hard, and you try to, present to us and persuade us to follow, whether we follow or not, that's our individual choice, and I heard you, and I heard you clearly there. But here's a question. If our goal is, instead of taking whatever water comes and take care of it at the other end, pump it out, treat, if your aim is, let's take any water that's going into the sewer system out of there, is a city prepared to declare a moratorium on new construction until we get this issue all squared away, or have them, every time the builder proposes something, that they have to almost have a sufficient way of treating whatever they're going to contribute through the disconnected sewer system and not contribute to the current load that we have.
Yeah, so I mean, I can't speak to the city issuing any moratoriums or anything like that, but I can speak from the sanitary end. Anytime a new connection is added to the system or anytime any sanitary infrastructure improvements are completed, it has to be run through EGLE and you have to get a Part 41 construction permit. With those permits, they look at the capacity of any contributing lines that you go through, any downstream pump stations, and eventually the treatment plant to make sure that those additional added homes or added contributions can be handled within that system. So again, I can't speak to anything new, but I can tell you what the general process is.
That's a policy question, not an engineering question. Every drop you save up front will have,
I just wanted to revisit that idea of a retrofit of a home being a little bit different from a home being designed to use a sump pump to begin with. And I was just hoping you could comment on that and maybe, I don't know, do you have any architects or structural engineers on staff that have considered that kind of issue?
Yeah, so maybe I'll let you answer this one, Mike, generally to the Grand Rapids program and what was done.
So what you see in a house that wasn't designed for one is that's generally tied in downstream from the clean out someplace. Just the footing drains and the house drains, foundation drains are put in just like you would whether you have a sump pump or not. It's under the floor and around the outside. And then the difference is there's that connection there instead of being a sump there. Is the big difference between them.
I mean, in your experience, though, is there any difference in the way the pipes are sloped or, constructed or routed that could have an impact on, your foundation stability, things like that?
Not that I'm aware of. We did over 800 houses and just, I'm going to say 790 of them that, well, some weren't tied in, but 98% of the tied in were set up just like that. The sewer was going out and was tied in. We broke up the floor, put the sump over here, put a distance between them, and put a backflow preventer in that went out. Restored the floor. And pretty much them drain tiles tend to be almost level anyway when they put them in. So.
And did the city of Grand Rapids have anyone who experienced like foundation settling or water intrusion issues that they didn't have previously after the installation of a sump pump?
I'm not aware of any settling that went on after the installation of the sump pump. When you say water intrusion issues, certainly there was water running in the sump pump.
Unrelated to sump pump failure, but say, someone, basically you change the hydrologic profile around their foundation.
No, the only time we experience that is in some of the older neighborhoods downtown when we lined pipes and people didn't have sump pumps. And we would suddenly quit draining the neighborhood and the water table came up into their basement because we stopped the pipes from leaking. But that was in the older areas of town. We had that experience a couple times.
Shall I save the question for the 7 o'clock? I can ask it right now.
No, well, let me get you the mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late, so I didn't hear everything. But the comment was made that you don't know how to model 180 individual homes. I agree with that. What I don't understand is why you don't go to each individual home and find out what happened, particularly in the 2017 flood. And the reason I say that is that I know in 2017 I did not have sewage backup. But I did have water intrusion coming through my home. I had about 2 inches of water in my basement. It all came in through the groundwater coming up to the level. And I guarantee you, I do everything I can to get water away from my home with gutter systems. And so that's my real question is, and Steve, you and I have talked about this before, is why not go to each individual home? It's only 180 homes. Don't try to model it. Get the information, get the data. Thank you.
You guys going to you want to respond?
We're just trying to decide who.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple components. Again, generally the modeling, you're correct. To put monitors and try to get information from every home based on sewer monitoring is difficult. I believe, Bruce, that you guys did map out who had flooding issues as part of the 2017, but
some of the FEMA information was done, data collection after 2017. Well, to answer your question, I'm still wondering, the solution isn't any different. If you had the sump pump added to your home that would drain that water away from the foundation and that would help get that water out as it's designed, as your footing drains and maybe the other parts of the system downstream were experiencing the surcharging. So the answer still is that excess water is getting in there, it's contributing, it's going downstream, which we need to remove. had you had a sump pump and it was running and functioning, getting that water out of that foundation drain, which is where your seepage came from, that could have prevented the backup that you had also, even though it was not a sanitary backup. We're still removing that excess water in the system.
Dumping it into the inland drain, which is insufficient.
Correct, but that is a separate issue that is not part of this at this point.
Look at the whole problem, that's what we're trying to tell you. You said that at 3 different meetings I've been at. Nobody listens. They just say, well, we're talking about the sewer system. We're talking about water in our area. And you don't address that at all. As a matter of fact, all you're going to do is pump more water into the inland drain. It's going to back up and raise the water table.
I think Brad addressed that a little bit with some of that other comment.
That wasn't really a question. We hear you. We're running short on time, guys. We've got about 8-9 minutes. So if there's anybody that has a question, because we want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Steve, can you hand them back to the gentleman?
There was a request to put the website back up there so you can see. So if anybody didn't catch that,
Yeah, one final question, then I'm done. It bothered me for a while, but one of the primary justifications, if not the primary justification, for choosing the option that the city had chosen is to keep water away from the wastewater treatment plant and keep our basements dry. Well, down Sturgeon Creek Parkway, down Sturgeon Avenue, and connecting streets, and I know a little bit about this because I lived on Marlboro Court. Thank God I didn't live there in 2017 or 2020 because it became an island in the middle of a lake. But there's overland flooding down those streets, big time, in big amounts. So basements get filled up with water, almost like a swimming pool, and all that water is going down the floor drain and into the sanitary system. So has that been looked at? Do you just shut the pump station down every time that happens? Why are they not part of this program? It looks to me like if anybody needs to be disconnected, it's those homes that have their entire basements filled with overland water every time we have a major event. Think of all that water. A swimming pool draining down into the floor drain. What's being done about that?
So your question is why haven't those houses been part of these priority 1 areas?
Correct.
So, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's the answer. I think you're right. I think there's and I'm going to summarize here, but I think what has been said over and over again from different people is the inland drain and into Sturgeon Creek is another source. When those we're talking, this program is not addressing the overland flooding, or is not addressing the creeks and the drains. It's not. We understand it's a problem, and you've heard probably in a roundabout way that we know we need to address it. We don't have anything definitive to address it. Brad, we will, right? Anyway, the point being is when those creeks and drains, for whatever reason, rise up because the culverts get blocked or whatever, that then makes a lake, as you described, for Marble Court in particular, which actually, it wasn't an island anymore, it was actually Atlantis, is another source, a heavy source of water infiltrating the sanitary sewer system. And your point is, shouldn't we be looking at that if we're trying to eliminate sources of infiltration?
It's a huge amount of water.
It's a huge amount of water.
Swimming pool being sucked out into the.
So we hear you. It's noted. That's about all we can say right now.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't have addressed what was coming down the sanitary. I mean, those houses or other things
No, it did. Because what he's saying is there's so much surface water that is going into the homes that then can put reverse pressure into the sanitary sewer system. So that is a source of infiltration.
Absolutely. Yep, you're right. But again, to address it wouldn't be a sump pump or footing drain. There's other things that need to be done, which is. Yep.
Okay. Right, but I'm coming back to my original comment. If one of the, if not the primary concern is keeping water away from the wastewater treatment plant, that is an enormous amount of water, far more water than what our 180 homes are providing here.
Yeah,
Why is that not, if not the top priority, a very high priority.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the idea being to address the sanitary sewer flooding within the priority one
Yeah,
neighborhoods.
this gets back to what I've been trying a holistic approach to solve the problem once and for all. That's not going to solve their problem. Maybe it solves our problem, maybe it doesn't. But it doesn't solve them. And it comes back to a comment I once made about Midland City of Science and become a city of sewage. And we've got to solve everybody's sewage problem. Okay, I'm making a speech, but I did wonder why that's not looked at. And I lived there once, and thank God I wasn't living on Marvel Court in 2017 or 2020. Because my house, actually the upper story of my old house, was an island in a lake. That basement had been pumping all kind, not pumping, but allowing all kinds of water to flow directly into the sanitary system. Now I don't know the pump station that's involved there. I don't know if that also gets shut off like the Moorland one does. But you probably know the answer.
That flows into Valley. That flows into Valley.
Okay. Did that get shut down?
We did shut down because of the rising level of water.
Right.
Sturgeon Creek rate, that was because of the dam collapse. But it's the
But
same
in
sort of thing.
2017, they had the same thing happened in 2017.
I don't know that we shut it down in 2017.
But the point is, you're getting far more water heading into the wastewater treatment plant from that area than you are from our 180 homes.
Okay, good point. We're at the end of our coming up on our 6:30. Anybody who hasn't asked a question?
One quick question.
Yes, no, hang on, John. As long as nobody else has got a question. Okay.
Is a FDD program necessary to qualify for an SRF loan? Yes or no?
No, but the Eagle, like we talked about, Eagle is looking at the permits as part of the collection system, and any treatment plant has those MPDS permits and permits collection system as part of that. While it's not a requirement now, Eagle has said it will be a requirement to follow that 275 gallons per capita per day threshold for I&I in order for them to continue to, approve projects and fund things and stuff. So while FDDP is not the only answer and not the only way to do that, they are looking for that reduction threshold, and that will be in there at some point in time.
I may have missed it. How did we become priority one?
Yeah, the question was, how did Moorland get into the priority one area? And I'll let Bruce answer that just because he was around with the original study.
The definition from the original study were homes that flooded in the 2017 event were identified as priority one areas. The initial model that was done in the very first study by OHM and HRC, which did not have any flow monitors and do some actual measurements, indicated we had the actual flooding, and then we had some theoretical flooding from that model. So then the second portion of that was refine the model, get the measurements, and the fact is it takes time, sometimes months, to wait for those rain events so that we can calibrate the model to have accurate flows and measurements of what's going to happen in that system and how will it react. If we put it in 6 months, we only get an inch rain event, I can't really calibrate it to say what's going to happen in a 25-year event. So that is part of the reason it did take so long for us to, present and come to these conclusions.
I guess I'm not sure it answered my question. I'm sorry. How did we become priority one? Why are we first?
Priority one were areas that flooded in the 2017 event. They experienced, not overland, they experienced basement sanitary backups. Those were what is defined as priority one.
Okay. Thank you.
We should probably wrap.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the email address. If I don't have the answer, I'll find somebody that does. And thank you guys for coming out. We appreciate your input and your concerns. We understand it's a unique topic, but I know Brad's probably got hand cramps right now because he's been writing notes the entire time, but we're going to take all your concerns back to a council workshop and address these with council. So thanks again for your time, and have a good night, guys.